Welcome to the meaty part of the curve, 30 minutes of fundamentals, tech, teaching, and talk. We're your hosts, Jeremy Bond and
Kendra Brown.
We'll be here weekly hosting a webisode featuring special guests, surprises, and straight talk about the day's instructional challenges. The views and opinions expressed on the meaty part of the curve are exclusively the thoughts and opinions of the hosts and or their guests and do not necessarily reflect those of Central Michigan University. We don't have any actual official guests today, so
no, we don't.
This is all on us.
But we're going to have two guests here pretty darn quick.
Well, and we've got a third person who's joined us now, so today we can treat our audience like our guests, and we're hoping for a little bit more input than we've had in the past. The lack of input in the past, in fairness, was totally my fault. Kendra and I discovered after the show concluded last week that I'd never actually enabled real chat permissions for the program, and as a result, people were attempting to interact. A lot of people sending us private moderator-only messages, and at no point did the light go on for me that perhaps I'd not turned on the ability for our listeners to chat with us. So what's the expression? My bad, I guess, in that case. But it is on today, and in fact, if you have audio capability at your end and you'd like to speak up and contribute that way, you certainly can. But before they decide if they're going to do that, maybe we should share just what it is we're talking about this week.
No, I'm going to pose it as a question.
Okay.
So using the chat and or if you'd like to speak up, as Jeremy said.
Anybody but Brian is welcome to speak up. We're going to mute Brian for everybody's protection. he may not be laughing.
Well, it's very possible. And adjectives, or in whatever way, shape, or form you choose, in chat box, give us your definition, briefly, of rapport.
Okay, so we're looking for brief definitions, synonyms for rapport. Okay.
Yep.
And you're hoping people are going to light up this chat box like a flame.
Yep.
And it looks like they're going to. I see people typing. So our job then is to fill the air while they furiously type. Great connection.
So see, they're already good at it.
Well, and I think it's a concept that all of us have some familiarity of. We hear that word and we have some immediate thoughts about connections, about building relationships. Things of that nature.
We can have more than one too.
Oh yes, say as much as what's on your mind for sure. Let's know what we really think about when we hear the term rapport.
Because clearly you and I have no rapport.
No, there's almost animosity here. In fact, the new term is frenemies, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think is what kids say.
Yeah.
I can only.
It kind of scares me that you already know what frenemies are.
I do. Well, my daughter, a lot of these Disney programs, and they use words. They're invented words, but it's neat at the same time to be involved in teaching a little bit of communication and seeing the language evolve. Something shared, understanding through tolerance.
I like that one.
You know what? And I like what Jack has to say too. It's a warm and fuzzy kind of thing.
Yep.
We're definitely talking about a softer skill. It's one of those things I think that many of us know when we see, but it is a little bit harder to maybe measure in a true hard sense.
Yep.
Do you want me to put up what we put together? Safe to be open and honest, Jeff?
Yep, I think we can.
Yeah, I think we can see what they say officially, right? This is as official as a Google dictionary definition will get you, with a little bit of an artistic touch on it. But I think this fits well with what everyone's had to say up to this point. We're talking about a close and harmonious relationship with people, probably in groups, and they're looking to understand one another, and through that understanding, that's why we went with this definition, Stephanie. You know me too well. The synonym bond, I said, Kendra, look at rapport as a synonym for me. But the outcome is to hopefully communicate well, to build shared understandings and things of that nature. And so with the shared thought in mind, where we went with our planning was this notion that there are some really simple, basic kinds of things that one can do immediately, early on, and repeat often. And then there are also probably some more sophisticated was the word that we were using quite a bit. Sophisticated kinds of techniques that can be tried with certain levels of comfort or rapport. We're gonna overuse the daylights out of that word today. Are already created, established.
But I'd like to, since we have some participation today,
Good participation.
I want to keep that going. I want to ask our audience, do they think they have rapport in their classrooms?
You think anyone will say no?
Well, I hope not. But I'm curious.
Well,
some people might be comfortable with it. Some people might not be.
While they think about that, I'll tell a story.
Cool.
And that way they'll know that Tammy says no, she never has any rapport. She may be joking. This was a handful of years ago, I think 2008 or thereabout. A course I had been teaching was no longer going to be offered at the institution where I was teaching it. And they wanted to move me into a different course. And the way that they decided to do that was 4 weeks into the current semester, the instructor who had been assigned to this particular course actually took ill during the 3rd week. The class had met twice, missed class once, and they sent me in to replace him in the 4th week. And it was to build rapport with those students who had already felt abandoned, sort of, I think jilted is the word that I would use in this case. That was probably the most challenging semester I've experienced in terms of building rapport with the students, because I couldn't jump right into rapport. I had to do repair first, because they'd not had a good experience up to that point. The instructor who was with them was new to the subject matter, and his health was failing, and it was just a very complicated situation. And I tried too quickly, I think, to get them working with one another, put them into teams, and one of the things I had them do is come up with team names. And here comes the real ouch. One of the groups called themselves the Bond, that's B-O-N-D, haters. They really, we didn't have rapport. By the end of the semester, I'm happy to say I did turn it around. We finished strong. It was a good group. Fortunately, it was a 16-week term, so I had a long stretch with them. But it was an uphill climb for a while.
So you have been in those situations.
I have. But
I would bet everybody in our audience has probably been there or...
Well, look at what Tammy has to say is rapport is something she starts to try to build before class ever even meets. An opportunity I wasn't afforded in this case. But I think the when of rapport is at least as important as the what.
Good point.
To be able to get a running head start on forming connections by sending welcoming messages, by having students introduce one another. And Jack says a month before he'll make contact if he can. I think those things are key. If we have the ability to make the connections in advance, we should. I want to pick up on a point that Tammy made, because I think we've got some material, and this group no doubt has some ideas too. Having the students introduce themselves. And Tammy says introduction postings. I'm reading into that. Threaded discussion. Kendra, take a moment though and share with us. You pulled some sources together that we're going to use. People might want to take a look at afterward. What do you have for us?
Well, where this whole idea came from is we were planning our sessions for this fall, built off of the Great Lakes Conference back in the spring. And I know Tammy was there. There might have been some, Brian was there, obviously, and Stephanie was there. I'm trying to remember, Jack couldn't make it this year.
I don't remember seeing Jack this year. And Jack, if you were there, we're both very sorry.
I probably saw you, but I'm just drawing a blank right now.
Brian's sort of always there. I'm not even sure the conference would happen without Brian, frankly.
This is true. But anyway, one of the keynote speakers, his name is William Buskiss. He's from Auburn University. And if you were there and listened to him, he did a session on creating a civil classroom climate, the many benefits of student-teacher rapport. And it really hit me what he had to say. As we have discussions all the time with faculty that are struggling with students in their classroom, trying to keep students engaged and so forth. And there was just some some pretty simple points that he hit on that just resonated with me. And that's kind of where this whole session started from. So going off of that, I'll hit on probably the 4 major points he hit for me. Was mutual respect, mutual responsibility, which I found fascinating, where not only is it participation and preparation on both parts of the student and the instructor.
Okay, so it becomes apparent that everybody's making an investment of time, energy, so that hopefully when they're together, there's contribution from both sides.
Correct.
Okay, which feeds back into respect too, I think.
Yep. Being personable, which for pretty much all of us is pretty easy to do. But
we like to think so.
We like to think so. But our personalities, being cognizant that our personalities might be different and might affect someone differently, just being cognizant and aware of that. But then lastly is mutual trust. Mm-hmm. I mean, those 4 pieces kind of all feed together, but it really hit me as we try so hard sometimes that maybe we're actually doing the reverse.
I see.
When you're getting there. But again, this is where it all kind of came from. Those were just my brief notes. This was not, any major literature review or anything on my part. This is...
No, but obviously Buscus resonated with you. Yes. You remembered this is a presentation you saw months ago now. And if you look him up, there's other stuff out there too that he's written and published on this and related topics. But what I'm hearing is that there's a lot that goes into this. These themes are broad to me, and I've heard a couple times in the last couple of weeks, meetings I've been in with faculty. And I think the term I've heard from faculty is they want quick hits, quick solutions. The term that I tend to use about myself is I want some tricks. I want some things that I haven't done to build some of these things, to create safety and trust and comfort. Yeah. And I'm going to steal one right out of the gate to kind of get this discussion rolling. Tammy mentioned having her students introduce themselves. I don't think she'll mind me sharing another technique that she uses as a sort of a spin-off of that. But as the students start sharing the details that have been solicited in the form of those introductions, at least with online students, she builds a spreadsheet, a matrix, with their names, with key facts about them, so that in correspondence and interaction, there's a reference. And I like that. I think, in fact, I hesitate to call it a trick, because a trick, I think, maybe cheapens what it really is. We have a lot of students, and yet at the tops of so many lists that we looked at in preparing for today, it says learn to call them by name. I would love to, but I need a way to get there, because I may have many, I may have more than I can remember, and some names just seem easier. I've asked students to do silly things like sit in the same place, the same area of the room. Please don't change your hair a lot during the semester. But that's not me really learning who they are, and so I like Tammy's method of connecting names with some relevant details about people, and I think it then ties into some of the more sophisticated things that William recommends, like this idea to maintain rapport, that we check on each other's progress. Right. And by that, we're showing a commitment to each other. How are things going? How was your daughter's first day of kindergarten? These kinds of things that we track about one another in a way of showing some care and some compassion. So another article I looked at, it wasn't about rapport, but it was about adult learner motivation, and it had a framework. And instructor involvement was one of the 6 key dimensions that these researchers identified that motivated learners, was knowing that their instructor's involved in their learning. And I think involvement is a clear element of rapport too. Yeah. I'm interested, what else are people doing that are with us today? Their rapport building secrets. Tammy, I gave one of yours away. I know you have others. Jack seems to like that idea. I have my students do a media-based introduction. We use a tool called Photo Babble. That's photo with an F. Super simple tool. Kendra's bored of hearing about it because I bring it up in so many sessions. But it lets them share a visual item they choose and record an audio component of their own choosing. And I make suggestions about the things they may want to consider sharing with the class. But the variety of these is really fascinating of what comes in.
Well, I'm going to reference back to last week's session. For those that were with us, we got to meet Troy. Troy Hicks, the new teaching and learning consultant for CEDL.
Very good. Well done.
But one thing that he does is have all of his students write down one hope, one fear, and one expectation. Helps him get to know his students a little bit better, help set aside their fears or help them progress through their fears or direct those fears.
Well, let me step through my recollection. And Troy's not here to correct this, but I think in between, so the student is asked to write down a fear, a hope, and an expectation about the class, and then they're given an opportunity to share what they choose to share with one or two other people, I think he said in the class. And it was just a partnering. And then they're ultimately turned over to him. And the key piece to me, I think the one that speaks most strongly to student-instructor rapport is then in the following meetings of the class, he makes a point to address, where appropriate, individually items. He reaches back out to people individually and then thematically tries to address certain things with the whole class. And as he put it, and I'm paraphrasing again, it shows that he was actually taking in the information and acting on it. Another element, I think, of that key dimension of instructor involvement. But it also ties to another of the key elements, this notion of community building, being part of a learning community. And we've got a bunch of stuff that's come in the chat. So Tammy's talking about her methods for threaded discussion, which, because these get used so often, I think we forget just how effective and powerful they can still be. But when she offers her final feedback, she goes back and wishes them good luck in their journey, career path, tying everything back together, replies to each student on their introduction individually. I can't say that I do that. I try to get a reply to several, but everybody gets individual feedback on that photo babble. And what I like about the way that I do that is it's private between me and the student. So sometimes I'll ask them other things, and then we end up starting a correspondence. It's true what she says, though. Some will write a novel, and others will barely put anything. But I think the flexibility is important. So some people are really open and want to share immediately, and others take a while to feel comfortable doing that, and still others are never going to share beyond a certain level. It's relative, but hopefully it's still everyone is involved. Right?
Well, and hopefully you're setting the example too.
Sure. And I would say Tammy's model definitely sets an example. No doubt about it. And Troy's technique, there's so many variations of that I think Jim Farrell, a previous director of what's now CEDL, would talk a lot about the muddiest point. Entrance tickets, exit tickets. Now, obviously, the focus on those sorts of those techniques shifts more to the content, but it's still another opportunity for students to express themselves and have the instructor act on those items. So we've got a punch list of stuff, right? That are some of the simpler kinds of things. And we boiled them down still, but this list, again, is from a collaborative effort between Buskus and Brian Seville, both of Auburn University, it looks like.
And we can share this listing out with anybody if they would like
Well, I think we'll link to it when we post the recording.
Absolutely.
When the podcast version of this goes out, we'll make sure that this link is there. But they talked a little bit about posting and keeping office hours. And you and I beat that up in our planning sessions, because office hours, not that people don't still have office hours and need to separate their spheres of work from life and so forth, but we really felt like accessibility is what that was truly getting at. Accessibility of responsiveness, care of response. I'm guilty of the one-word reply. And it's motivated by efficiency. It's motivated by clarity. It's motivated by working for a very concise manager for a number of years and realizing, yeah, I can address lots of things with one or two words. Tammy doesn't know, and Tammy and I correspond. I can verify that she's not big on the one-word emails, but I am. But my point in bringing it up is people put a tone on very brief emails that the sender might be angry or otherwise filled with some sort of consternation. And so I let my students know in my syllabus, when we first meet, in my earlier communications, that if I can reply in one word, I probably will, that I'm not upset with them. Sometimes if I think of it, I'll include a smiley face so that they, yes, smiley face, no, smiley face. So there's nothing but a tone of happiness and efficiency in those replies. But accessibility responsiveness is what I think when we hear office hours, and because he goes on in the same list to say get online, use email to increase accessibility to your students. And Stephanie mentioned not even in texting is she one-word responder. But I think just the very mention of texting, that's another way in 2015 that we can be accessible and responsive if it's a method we're comfortable with.
Correct.
And we can create a classroom culture where it's used for the right sorts of things. Yeah. Because I think more, and this ties back to our premiere show, who our students are today. More of them are texters probably now than historically they have been. What you want to add some other things, Kendra, I can tell. Well, then I'll talk some more.
Okay, go ahead. It'll come back to me. I'm older than you, so.
You are quite a bit, in fact. But I like the making eye contact with each student without staring, glaring, or flaring. I think we need to consider cultural differences when it comes to eye contact too. That not every person's background makes eye contact a positive necessarily, but along those lines, when we're online, and we're not practicing what we preach and what I'm going to say next because this is radio, but whenever you can, when in a virtual session with your students, turn your camera on, but make sure to look at it every now and then. You know, I try to show my good side in sessions like these, get it? But with the camera on, it's important then to look at the camera. It's as close as we get to virtual eye contact. But I like
again, they goes back to that responsiveness and acknowledging.
Well, and there's this whole range of responsiveness, right? My mind immediately goes to how quickly are you returning emails. But if a student asks a question in a class, look at them while giving that response, and be mindful of facial expressions, posture. This is their last piece of advice on this list is don't forget to smile. We're supposed to be excited about our subject matter. And
hopefully
our
you're
students,
excited about your subject matter if you're teaching it.
Be enthusiastic about teaching and passionate about your subject matter is the longest bullet point on this list we have. And the students are relying on us to hopefully discover and share in some of that passion that we feel for our subjects.
Because do you remember how many times you were in a classroom where I
thought some of my professors hated their disciplines. As an 18-year-old undergrad,
passion is contagious.
And yet others made me want to do what they were doing. You know my side fascination with history. I credit the high school history instructors I had and some of my undergraduate history professors with my passion for that because they brought it to life. They clearly loved it. And that's where my passions come from. I just didn't think I could make a living over there with that. So it's remained a hobby. Although they have, and many others do. But
although you
publishing
some of that.
I did. Well, for beer money, I think would be a fairer summary. But that's true.
But we've got 5 minutes left here.
We do.
But bringing it all together, why are we talking about rapport? Why does it matter, and so forth? And I want to jump to a study I found by Brandy Frisbee and Matthew Martin in 2010. And it's about instructor-student and student-to-student rapport. But here's what brought it all home to me.
We'll get the link to this.
We'll get the link to this.
Good.
Classroom rapport is positively correlated with an improved learning environment. These results bolster the argument that students enter our classroom with a need for instructors to like them, and that instructor-student rapport is an ever vital aspect of student success.
Ah.
Is that not why we're here?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So we don't know that good rapport causes student success, but we do know where rapport is present, student success is also present.
Okay.
I like that. They also concluded that good instructor-student rapport reduces anxiety, increases participation, structure, and it encourages social interaction. I've always had this hope, and occasionally I come across it, where my students are actually talking to each other and other students outside of class about our class, about the content in particular. Hopefully the stories don't begin with, "You will never believe what he did this week," but instead, here's what we're learning about, here's what we're talking about. Go fight that fire, Brian.
Hopefully it's not literal.
Yeah, get the truck and the sirens and everything going.
No,
we're always glad you can join in with us. But I felt, there was a number of times I felt anxiety as a student, and I think knowing that some of these things and knowing that our own students may be, whether they're young college students, they've not been to college, people returning to the classroom, all variety of students are going to feel some sort of jitters. Whether we call it anxiety, as I've done, as Frisbee and Martin did, or we just call it the butterflies, whatever. This sort of thing can go a long way to helping students let go of some of that and fully engage in the course, and thereby get something out of it.
I still remember, yes, I've been out of school for a long time, I still remember those instructors that I had that rapport with, that I connected with. I still remember the content that they delivered. I don't remember anything from Geology 101 in a lecture hall. No offense to lecture halls, you can still build rapport in lecture halls.
Sure.
But that's what I'm saying is, I remember those things even all these years later than in those classrooms where that it didn't appear to be present.
Well, and what you're talking about then is retention, and that people remember the way they were made to feel. And if we can attach learning to those positive feelings, it'll last, and that's what the data really suggests. We should probably move toward wrapping up. I'm always astonished at how quickly we can use 30 minutes. We can't take all the credit this week, though. I think Jack, Brian, Stephanie, and Tammy were major assets today.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about next week's going to be a frenzy for us.
Next week
we have the biannual Global Campus in service, so we won't have our usual gobs of prep time for the show. But what are we going to talk about next week?
Next week's session, and it just so happens when we built the schedule, honestly, this wasn't even planned this way, this just so happened, that we're going to talk about why we need faculty development training, or what can we do to keep our minds going, to continue to expand our talents. Hopefully we'll give you some tips of where to look for those kinds of things, not necessarily the traditional places you might.
Because we're going to parade out our favorite resources.
Yes.
The emails we get, the listservs we're on, the organizations we check out, conferences we visit. But also talk about all the internal stuff we have that you may not know about or may not have looked at recently. Might be
forgotten about. I don't remember yesterday, let alone what I did 6 months ago.
I was going to say I don't remember what I had for breakfast, but you do, because I sat right next to you while I ate it. On that note, I think I want to just say thanks to everyone again for joining us. Hope to see all of you and maybe several others online next week. And meanwhile, remember to keep calm and aim for
the meaty part of the curve.
Take care, everyone.